forging the cat's paw. The iron tasted of coal and oil on the craftsman's fingers as he slid the cat's paw into place. Guilt tightened his throat, while the accused lay strapped beneath the bench, and the chamber held its breath. The narrator wrote the instrument's serial mark into the margin without looking up. The central problem was immediate and crude. A crafted claw had become evidence and sentence at once. The witness made a small sound and tugged at her shawl. That motion defined the stakes. The claw would decide whether she lived or whether a household's ruin would be blamed on her fingers. From the first breath in the room, the conflict was simple and raw. An accused woman, an iron tool, and men who needed the demonstration to seal a verdict. The narrator recorded the time in steady ink and noted the place. A vaulted inquisitorial chamber off the chapel, late evening. He did not call anyone by title in those notes. He listed objects. The bench, the strap, the grit in the stone floor, the cat's paw with its serrated inner curve. The narrator's tone remained clinical when he spoke aloud. Record the mark, he said. Record the tool and the witness. His voice did not soften when the witness looked up. The craftsman kept his head down. He wore the heavy leather apron described in every registry and kept both hands steady. He set the iron into the wooden handle, tapped the rivets, and tested the spring with a practiced thumb. He spoke once, short and flat. It fits. The craftsman measured with his eye more than with any ruler. His movements showed shame in small details. The way he wiped his palm on his apron after touching the steel, the half-second he paused before lifting the tool to the light. Those motions conveyed his emotion root, guilt without explanation. The craftsman had made the shape. He had not wanted the shape to be an accusation in a stranger's life. Anonymous witness breathed through a thin mouth. Her voice was a tremor. I know that notch, she said. She her name once during questioning. Everyone used witness in the ledger. That notch came from my daughter's house. Her hands clawed the edge of the bench. The room altered at that line. The narrator's ink tipped. His hands stayed steady. The first external shift arrived when a scribe in the doorway explained how the household had been burned the week before. That fact was the next violence in the room. Burnt beams, a blackened cradle, an unpaid debt that had become a charge of witchcraft. The narrator stepped closer, eyes on the craftsman. Do you recognize the mark? He asked. The craftsman met the narrator's gaze and then looked away. I made a variant for that lord last winter, he said, voice low and rasping. The admission moved the room from hypothesis to accusation. They pushed for names and prices. Papered receipts, the craftsman's ledger entries, a clipped line in the parish records. Each was a small, precise event that shifted suspicion into a structure. The narrator read the entries aloud. November 13th, Clause 5, payment recorded. He lifted his spectacles and peered at the metal fingerprint in the instrument. The witness leaned forward and touched her shawl. A talisman slipped free and fell over the parchment. All motion in the room stuttered to that single thread of cloth. The craftsman froze when he saw the talisman. He knew the sigil sewn into it, an emblem from the debtor household. He recognized the way a certain notch had been filed to fit a specific hand. The craftsman answered with a detail, not an apology. He named a small modification and the fee requested for it. I filed the inner tooth at the request of Master Renard, he said. He insisted on a notch so the claw would grip under the scapula. The detail changed the charge from coincidence to custom. That was the first emotion shift. Guilt tipped toward defensive pragmatism. He had been proud of his workmanship. That pride now hardened into a claim of craft. The witness mouthed the word Renard with her lips as if tasting a bitter herb. Renard took my stove and my keys, she said. He had my husband bound and thrown from the river. When she spoke, the room took another step. The narrator did not comment, he wrote. The scribe moved to the ledger and whispered a cross-reference. The narrator read the cross-reference aloud, and then turned the question to the craftsman with a deliberate, small cruelty. Why would Master Renard require that notch? The craftsman picked up the iron, his fingers rubbing the seam where metal met wood. His voice cut short. He wanted a hold that would not slip on old, wet skin, he replied. He did not soften the syllables. Confessions come easier when the tool is certain. Men at the doorway shifted. The witness clenched both hands. She tasted blood in her mouth. That sentence turned procedure into motive. The notch had been requested to extract confession with certainty. A new external event arrived. An offstage voice ordered a public demonstration. Heavy footsteps along stone, a command from the chapel bench. The narrator recorded the order and did not flinch when the craftsman hesitated. The hesitation was a visible crack. His hand lingered on the handle, his jaw worked. He looked at the witness and then toward the bench where a cadaver in a shroud lay ready to be used for demonstration. That was emotion shift number 2. Defensive pragmatism shifted into rationalization and then into dread. The craftsman himself, the demonstration would end doubt. The witness heard it as spectacle. They rolled the cadaver onto the demonstration bench. The narrator watched the way the clamps bit into flesh, and how the cat's paw settled into the carpenter's vise. He narrated the tool's anatomy with clean, factual lines, and inner serration, a hooked lip, a tapered shank. Each label in his voice sounded like a certificate. He spoke without moralizing. Inner serration number 3. He recorded, grip angle aligned to 20 degrees. The craftsman took the tool, wiped his palms, and pressed the claw into a strip of animal hide he had prepared. The hide split along the file marks. The sound of tearing in the chamber was small and sharp. The witness made a small, near, silent sound when the hide tore. She had been listening for that precise noise in her sleep. She recognized a certain sequence of rasping. It matched the way the notch had scarred her daughter's shutters. "Stop," she said suddenly. Her line cut into the test. "Stop." It was used there. The room surged toward her word as if struck. The scribe fell quiet. The narrator held the ink in the nib. The craftsman spoke then with clipped precision. "I test my work on hide before delivery," he said. "Testing is how you ensure performance." He pressed the claw again to another patch of hide and let the iron's teeth sink. His voice contained no pleading. The narrator recorded the number of times he repeated the test. He wrote the pattern into the ledger, as if that repetition could be a form of absolution. An argument broke out between 2 men at the doorway, an inquisitor and a deputy magistrate, over whether the demonstration should proceed on a living scapegoat. Rapid lines flew back and forth. "You will not blight justice for spectacle." The magistrate snapped. "We have witnesses," he said. "We have the tool." The inquisitor countered. "We must show effect or the confession will be worthless." The exchange contained 3 sharp rounds of rebuttal. Each line shortened the distance to action. The witness whispered the name Renard again and pressed it into her chest. The craftsman remained in the center of the argument with the tool in hand. He moved like a man rechecking his glove fit. He spoke only when addressed. "If you will it, I will show it," he offered finally. His words were not triumph. They were a mechanical resolution. He placed the cat's paw back into the strap and adjusted it as if preparing a demonstration model. His breath came in small, controlled counts. The narrator observed the breathing as data. 3 counts, 4 counts, pause, actions, not feelings. At the doorway, a page carried a small clay seal and pressed it to the ledger. The seal carried Renard's mark. That simple contact between clay and paper focused the accusation. The witness's shoulders collapsed for an instant. She swallowed and leaned forward. "Renard paid twice for no witnesses," she said. "He wanted the notch for certainty." The scribe lifted a pen, and the chamber considered the line like a blade. The demonstration began with the cadaver. The craftsman set the claw against dead skin and tightened the handle. The narrator narrated each mechanical step with the dry cadence of a tradesman's manual. "Rivet 2 aligned." He recorded. "Grip pressure measured." He noted. The sound was mechanical. The scrape of iron, the rasp of cloth, a soft sucking when the claw was pulled free of the cadaver. The room registered the efficiency of the tool. The witness made a step toward the bench, and then reeled back when the execution showed precisely what the iron could do. Then someone ordered a live demonstration on a man brought in as a scapegoat, a petty thief traded for spectacle. Shouts, the clatter of chains, a man collapsing onto the demonstration bench with his wrists bound. The room shifted into its most basic economy. Spectacle, confession, justice. The craftsman did not argue. He positioned the cat's paw against the man's calves. He worked with the same exacting motions he used in the forge. He set the notch and the bench creaked under weight. The first pull was clinical and sharp. The man hissed. The sound filled the vault. The craftsman kept his jaw set and let the tool fulfill its purpose. The witness screamed in a thin, ragged voice and lurched forward. Stop. Stop. The craftsman paused, finger on the rivet. For the first time in the day, his hands trembled. He looked at the man and then at the witness. Silence fell short and brittle. Another voice, colder and official, cut through. Continue, the inquisitor ordered. We need testimony that stands in court. The craftsman's hesitation lasted one beat too long. He forced his hand to move and drove the claw home again. The man's screams were muffled by the stone and by the heavy curtain of distance between the officials and the suffering. The narrator wrote each sound as a notation, a soft vowel, a broken throat, silence. When the demonstration finished, the scapegoat could not speak. The witness collapsed onto a bench, fingers pressed to her mouth, eyes wide and raw. The craftsman set the tool down on a sheet of clean parchment and cleaned the blade with a rag while the scribe recorded the result. The room had split into factions. Those who felt the demonstration had proven efficacy, and those who had seen cruelty made precise. The narrator's voice remained an instrument of measurement as he listed the measurements of damage. He did not look toward the craftsman when he wrote the final line. The craftsman watched the ink form the verdict. Outside the demonstration, the chamber clerk stamped receipts and tallied payments. Lawyers whispered over coins. The witness was taken away to a smaller cell for further questioning. The craftsman was told his fee would be paid once the ledger closed. He answered with a single, even sentence, "Collect the fee," he said. "I will return in the morning." The line read like a transaction. That exchange was a small but decisive external event. Money would follow the demonstration, and the craftsman accepted it. His emotion shifted one last time, guilt folded under the need to survive. The narrator recorded the aftermath in exact tones. He noted the ding of a distant bell, the slow wiping of blood on a cloth, the way the iron left a residue of coal in the seam. He wrote the craftsman's payments, Renard's seal, the witness's talisman tied back into her shawl. These were the tangible consequences that the ledger would preserve. Then the craftsman packed the cat's paw into a wooden box, wrapped it in oiled cloth, and slid his signature iron clamp onto the lid. He did not look at the witness as she was led past the workshop doorway. The narrator watched the tilt of the craftsman's shoulders and recorded it as a mechanical readjustment. At the scriptorium, the narrator added the final notation that would allow the instrument to be used again. Demonstration complete. Tool accepted, he closed his book and pushed the page forward to the craftsman's hand. The ledger's line changed the tool from a single object into precedent. The craftsman took the receipt and signed with a scratch he did not bother to smooth. He left without answering the witness's small sound toward him. In the pre-dawn dim, the witness sat on a pallet and pressed the talisman against her palm until the thread stung. She mouthed names she needed to remember and then tried to not think. Her mind assembled precise recollections. The notch filed in Renard's workshop, the suit on the craftsman's hand, the exact way the cat's paw had caught on aged hide. Those concrete details formed an account she could speak if someone would record it. The narrator came once more to record her statements. He directed questions and wrote direct answers. The witness gave him dates, times, the names of neighbors, the payment schedule Renard had enforced. The narrator set the facts down. Each line in his hand was a future hinge. He did not lift his eyes to meet hers as he closed the book. A small twist opened then. The scribe discovered an unregistered receipt in the craftsman's pack, an extra payment unaccounted for in local ledgers. The scribe pushed it across the table and said the signature matched Renard's seal. The room saw the mismatch immediately. The extra receipt suggested concealment. The craftsman moved to retrieve the paper, but a deputy blocked him. The deputy asked for explanation, and the craftsman offered a clipped line. "I was paid in part by Renard for custom work." The deputy's hand tightened on the receipt. That revelation changed the burden of evidence. Now the tool's chain of custody contained deliberate payments that tied the craftsman, Renard, and the demonstration together. The narrator filed the new receipt with the rest and added a note. Extra payment implies complicit procurement. He did not write guilt again. The earlier ink had already recorded the craftsman's hesitation and the talismanous sigil. The witness was allowed to sleep for an hour before being taken to the chapel for final questioning. The craftsman locked his tools in the box and left the chamber with the payment tucked into a fold of his apron. He did not sing, did not boast. He did not look back. The chapter ended with a single, concrete beat. The narrator closed the ledger and a page fell open beneath his pen. A fresh sheet waited. He pushed it forward, set the pen down, and tapped the written line with his thumb. The craftsman placed the cat's paw box on the workbench and sealed the lid with his iron clamp. A knock came at the workshop door, sharp, measured. The craftsman looked up and reached for the latch as the sound repeated twice. That knock was a physical action tied to the day's decisions. Someone coming to collect payment or to demand answers. The chapter stopped on that knock, a tangible event that forced motion and would shape the next day's choices. Demonstration in the inquisitorial chamber. The accused screamed as the craftsman unfolded the cloth and revealed the cat's paw. Fear tightened the witness's hands against the bench rail and settled into the craftsman's throat. Doubt had been there before, then sharpened into a cold refusal to speak. The inquisitor's voice cut through the room. Name him. That demand framed the problem, forced confession under an engineered instrument, and set the chamber's machinery into motion. The room smelled of coal, wet leather, and candle wax. The narrator, ledger open on the archive table, watched without raising his head and recorded the tool's serial stamp. He noted the craftsman's hesitation and the witness shaking fingers. These were the facts that would later link this bench to other sessions. The narrator moved a pencil across the margin and kept the account clinical. The central conflict was visible. An instrument intended to extract names and a growing stack of traces that suggested the procedure was not isolated. The accused lay strapped on the bench with wrists bound to iron rings. He banged one foot until a guard stepped forward and pushed him back into the leather. "Speak," said the inquisitor, "who paid you?" The voice was flat, precise. The accused answered in short gasps and produced syllables the room took apart like tools under a lamp. The craftsman stood beside the forge bench, hands still smelling of coal and oil from an earlier job. He kept his posture low, shoulders working like a man who held a weight at his core. The narrator had written, in a previous session, about the metal tasting of coal on the craftsman's fingers. Now those oils showed as smudges along his cuffs. The craftsman avoided the inquisitor's eyes and kept the cat's paw angled so only the blade caught the candlelight. The inquisitor tapped the iron edge and explained procedure in a voice that framed pain as necessity. "We distract the body," he said, "and the mouth reveals the plot." He demonstrated with a blunt push against the claw's curve, showing leverage and purchase. The craftsman nodded and, without speaking much, fitted the claw to an adjustable arm attached to the bench. His movements were methodical. Each turn of the clamp was a measured technical step. "Show it," said the inquisitor. "Demonstrate the feed and the pull." "We will make this method plain for the record," He ordered the guards to keep the accused steady. The craftsman set the tool in position and wiped his palms on his apron. The room tightened. A single candle guttered and cast the accused's face into streaked shadow. An anonymous witness was brought forward and made to stand under the same candle. The witness's voice came thin and halting. "It left a mark, sir," the witness, and pointed where a seam of cloth had been torn from a missing laborer's sleeve. The inquisitor leaned forward. "Where did you see it?" he asked. The witness named a parish and a manor at St. Marsos Lane, the witness, eyes on the floor. A laborer came by with a torn sleeve and an iron stamp on the hem, same curve. The narrator wrote the parish into the ledger and paused as the craftsman's fingers tightened on a clamp. Guilt pressed at the craftsman's jawline. His mouth moved, but no words came. The craftsman swallowed and answered the inquisitor in measured syllables. "I make the tools as ordered. I mark them for inventory. I cannot track what men do beyond my bench." He tapped his leather tool belt and then the ring of iron clamps at his hip, as if the jewelry proved his trade's limits. The inquisitor's expression did not alter. He folded the statement into procedure and signaled the guards to proceed. The tension rose when the witness traced a serial mark on the tool and described prior sessions. "He remembers the number," the inquisitor, sounding almost pleased, read it aloud. The witness leaned and whispered the number. It matched a scrap the narrator had noted from Chapter 1's ledger. The craftsman felt the digits like a cold coin fall into his gut. Doubt that had been small in his chest opened toward alarm. Guards tightened straps and adjusted the knee bindings. The accused's breathing hitched. His eyes rolled and found the witness, only to see the witness push a hand against cold cheeks and step back. "I saw him at the mill," the witness, voice cracking. "I heard shouting. He had no wife, only a pack." The mark was on his sleeve. That concrete naming changed the demonstration into evidence. The inquisitor moved papers as if to seal the link into a file. The craftsman faltered when asked if every mark matched his work. He ran a thumb across a burn on his knuckle and answered thinly, "Not every mark. Some tools are adapted by others. I cannot vouch for every session." The inquisitor made a small sound that might have been a laugh. "You mark them so we can know, craftsman." "You keep the ledger too." The inquisitor's fingers turned a page. The act implied record and accountability more than any speech could. The craftsman looked away and then back. He tapped tools with an old tick and finally said, "We stamped them at my workshop." "A clerk signs the list," the inquisitor barked. "Bring the list next. We will note the circulation." The narrator wrote the order into the ledger and watched the craftsman refuse to name buyers. The man's mouth tightened. He pressed his palms flat to his thighs as if to flatten an urge to confess. The demonstration continued with the inquisitor giving technical points. The cat's paw is simple. Hook, leverage, and hold. Its design unpicks the skin without breaking the bone, so the subject yields names under controlled stress. He spoke without rhetorical flourish, treating the human body like an instrument panel. The craftsman turned the clamp, and the tool clicked into place. The accused's breathing stuttered. The inquisitor ordered a test to be shown on the leather, then insisted on its effect on flesh. "We will show its use once." The craftsman steadied the tool and bared his knuckle where a previous burn had scarred the skin. He did not speak. The guards tightened the straps. The witness looked as if he might bolt from the bench, but remained under instruction. Then the room changed. The cat's paw sank into soft flesh with a sound like metal through old leather. The accused shrieked. The witness lifted a hand to his mouth and started to whisper a name. The inquisitor kept count, pressing, asking one direct question after another. "Who paid you? Who sent you to the parish?" Each demand pulled words out like teeth. Accused. "I was hired by the contractor from Marsu. The man stole grain." Inquisitor. "Name the contractor." Accused. "Perrin, anonymous witness." Perrin worked odd hours at the mill. The exchange became quick, clipped lines of revelation. The inquisitor repeated names into the ledger while the craftsman adjusted the clamp in short, mechanical movements. The craftsman breathed through the test, and the witness began to tremble. The tremor turned into a language of motion. Hands clenching, nails digging into palms. The narrator recorded the admission and the serial mark. "This links a dozen sessions," he said, aloud once, and no one replied. The record was itself a kind of witness. It forced names into a network the chamber could follow. After the tool was withdrawn, the accused slumped forward and the guards caught him. The inquisitor rearranged the room's objects into official phrasing. He ascribed a note. Demonstration completed. Confession extracted under allowed means. The craftsman wiped the cat's paw on his apron until the rust and blood blurred into a dark smear. He moved like a man with a secret under his tongue. The witness, left to his feet, began to describe other disappearances and the names of men who had simply not returned from work. "There was a man named Lucian," he said. And then another parish name left his lips. The inquisitor's face sharpened around the mouth. "List them," he ordered. The witness listed 3 names in quick succession. Each name landed and the room moved to mark them with a pen. A small discovery shifted the momentum. The witness mentioned a number stitched into the hem of a shirt. The narrator compared it to the stamp on the cat's paw and found the 2 matched. That finding pulled the demonstration into proof. The craftsman tried to insist the mark was for inventory, but the inquisitor pointed to the ledger and the list of missing men. "Inventory of tools, inventory of men," he said. His voice contained no warmth. The craftsman backed away from the argument when the inquisitor brusquely ordered the guards to fetch crates from his shop. "You will come with us at dawn." The inquisitor. The craftsman responded with a staccato. "At dawn I forge. At dawn I keep my hands." He kept saying the practical facts as if they could hold him. The narrator noted the man's rhythm, the way practicality masked guilt. Outside the chamber, in the corridor, a guard found a scrap of cloth that matched the witness' description and brought it in. The discovery forced another page of action. A clerk compared fibers and recorded a match. The inquisitor then asked the craftsman, "Who else knows your stamps?" The craftsman avoided names and offered only method and routine. The gap between his knowledge and the evidence tightened like a vise. The witness broke at a single question from the inquisitor. "Did you ever see the craftsman at a manor?" He whispered yes, the witness, and then recounted a meal where the craftsman had been invited. Those details introduced faces not previously named. The inquisitor leaned back and made a single notation. The narrator paused and underlined the line in his ledger. The underline linked a party to a sequence of disappearances. The chapter reached a climax when the inquisitor ordered the tool applied again to force a final name. The craftsman hesitated and then tightened the clamp. The accused convulsed and named a manor overseer under the strain. Rapid back and forth followed. Inquisitor pressed, accused named, witness affirmed, guards held. The exchanges contained short lines of dialogue, sharp and functional. Accused. "He threatened to cut my wages." Inquisitor. "Name him." Accused. "Renaud, craftsman. I have hammered many claws, but I will not." "Oh, Inquisitor." "You will keep the ledger ready." That argument, 3 to 5 rapid exchanges, changed the direction. The craftsman's voice shortened. Guilt became calculation. After the climax, the room performed cover. The inquisitor changed the language of the event into official phrasing and had a clerk draft a file. The craftsman quietly began to wipe the cat's paw with a rag and then hid the serial mark under a new layer of oil. The witness sat down and wrapped both hands around his shawl, mouth moving in small repetitions. The narrator catalogued each motion. The narrator closed his ledger a fraction and spoke once. "This session will be entered under motion number 3-7-2. The mark's trail extends to Saint Marceau and possibly beyond." He did not sound surprised. He catalogued the connection to the earlier forge where, in Chapter 1, the iron had been shaped. That earlier work, hands with coal and oil, now cast a longer shadow across parishes. A final external moment arrived at the doorway. A clerk pushed a sealed letter across the threshold and said, "A request from a vicar for review." The inquisitor took the letter and read 2 lines. His eyes narrowed. He ordered the room cleared and the accused removed. The guards led the accused away with restraint and little ceremony. The craftsman gathered his tools and moved toward the door with the gait of a man who has been measured and found wanting. In the archive alcove, the narrator spoke to the witness. "Write it down plainly. Date, place, names." The witness's hands shook, but he wrote. The narrator watched the handwriting and compared it to the ledger. "Do not leave out details you recall in the street," he said. The witness nodded and folded the paper into his shawl. The last moments were concrete and administrative. The inquisitor ordered that the craftsmen's crates be inventoried at dawn and that the scribe prepare summonses for 2 manor overseers. The craftsman walked out into a corridor smelling of damp stone and hot breath. He did not look back. The narrator closed the ledger with a soft slap and placed it on the shelf beside the records of Chapter 1. The chapter left an aftertaste of unease. Names entered, a parish revealed, and tools tied to men who had disappeared. The narrator catalogued the session he had witnessed and promised, in his notes, to follow the serial marks further. The witness left the chamber muttering a parish name, and the craftsman returned to his bench at dawn to fetch the list the inquisitor had demanded. The door clicked shut with a guard's iron key, and the narrator wrote the final line that would lead the archive into the next session. Emotion shifts moved the characters. The craftsman from practical detachment to startled guilt to cautious avoidance. The witness from fear to compelled disclosure to a collapsing tremor of relief. The narrator from clinical observation to determined ledgering to procedural insistence that the trail be followed. Each change was expressed in action, hands clenching, papers underlined, tools wiped, never in abstract claims. The chapter resolved its immediate conflict. The demonstration produced a name, the link to other vanishings tightened, and the chamber set the next steps in motion. The last paragraph stops on an action. The inquisitor slid the signed order across the table. The clerk rose and sealed it, and the craftsman, carrying the rag with the cat's paw smear, stepped into the corridor where a guard closed the iron door behind him. Midnight ordeal in the chapel cellar. The craftsman tightened the last clamp and felt his fingers throb from the heat, while someone beneath the bench kicked once and a rough voice cut through the cellar. "Do it then." Doubt sat in the craftsman's throat and steered his hands. He paused, tested the claw's bite, then forced the hinge closed. The narrator recorded the action with the same dispassionate cadence he used for dates and seals, but the central problem was already obvious. The bench would pain the accused until a name was given, and names meant a chain of consequences outside the cellar. Within 5 sentences, the purpose of the night was clear: an extraction of complicity by instrument, and that purpose determined every small decision in the room. The narrator's voice described the room without sentiment. Stone steps, a single wooden bench bolted to the floor, a rack of iron instruments on the far wall, candles guttering in shallow holders. The narrator noted the time, midnight, then moved to catalogue the parties present. The craftsman stood over the bench, hands blackened and steady, though his jaw worked when he thought no one watched. The anonymous witness gripped the rail with fingers pale enough to show the tendon. Their breathing came in measured pulls. The accused lay strapped on their back, cloth torn, eyes squeezed shut, mouth working through breath that tasted of salt and fear. Doubt drove the craftsman into small evasions. He checked the clamp twice, as if a tiny misalignment might excuse him. He whispered, "It will be quick," not to the accused but to himself, and his words found no purchase in the stone silence. He had forged this claw in a workshop that smelled of coal and cooling iron. Chapter 1 recorded that process. The narrator mentioned that the cat's paw bore the craftsman's mark, and that he had filed that mark into the margin of his notes earlier, a neutral action that nonetheless tethered the instrument to a maker and a town. The tension rose when footsteps hit the stair, hard, pragmatic, full of purpose. The inquisitor arrived, robes trailing suit, and spoke once. Names now, the inquisitor's voice left no room for pause. The anonymous witness flinched and pressed their thumb into the rail until the wood creaked. The accused made a sound like a rag dragged over stone. Name him, the inquisitor repeated, each word deliberate. The central conflict tightened. The inquisitor demanded names to shore up a network of authority. The craftsman feared his mark might reveal collusion. The witness aimed to speak truth and feared reprisal. The craftsman adjusted the claw, hands moving with practiced economy. He spoke in clipped, low tones when the inquisitor looked his way. It was ordered, he said, by canon and scribe. I made as required. He kept his eyes to the metal. The inquisitor stepped closer and said, then prove it. Begin. A small exchange of glances passed between the craftsman and the witness. The witness mouthed something that could have been a name, then swallowed it back. Doubt shifted into fear when the first application began. The craftsman drew the cat's paw across exposed skin and the accused arched, a sound raw and immediate. The witness' hands tightened until the nails bit crescents into the palm. Their jaw worked. The first shift in emotion came clearly. Doubt became fear. The craftsman did not look at the wound. He listened to the intake and the inquisitor's satisfied silence. The narrator recorded the sequence clinically. Placement, pressure, pull, cry. The bench's function completed its terrible arithmetic, pain for information. The accused cried, I have nothing to give, and the inquisitor cut the line off with a flat hand. Then you keep what you know and you die with it. The inquisitor. The accused's voice broke to a whisper. I will say nothing I do not know. The witness tried to say a name but managed only a choked syllable. Say it. The inquisitor ordered, name him, or we end this here. The room unspooled into a pattern of demand and reply, each exchange short, raw, and functional. The dialogue served to push the plot forward. The inquisitor needed names to solidify a claim. The craftsman needed to avoid witness that tied him to a patron, and the witness needed to speak while fearing for their life. The craftsman's hesitation grew visible. His hands trembled once as he reset the claw. He remembered the forge. The ringing of hammer on iron, the angle of the curve that made the claw hold skin instead of merely tearing. Memory here is concrete. Chapter 1 had described the soldering seam he smoothed with a file. The craftsman felt his professional pride, work done to specification, battling the knowledge that the tool's use would seal a fate. This internal conflict brought the second emotion shift. Fear moved into a reluctant resolve, he thought. I made a tool. I will not unmake its effect, and that thought stiffened his fingers. An unexpected sound came from the stair. A muffled cough, then a whisper of someone else arriving. Footsteps too light to be an inquisitor, as too deliberate to be accidental. The witness' eyes darted to the stairs. The narrator noted the arrival without speculation. A canon seal had been mentioned in past records. The narrator had inked that seal in Chapter 2's margin. The witness, chest heaving, found a name on their tongue, Canon Renard, they said in a voice too small for the cellar. The inquisitor's pupils narrowed. The narrator described the sudden pivot. The engraved maker's mark on the claw matched a symbol known to the witness. The mark had been visible when the craftsman had slotted the tool into place. The craftsman had seen it too, but had avoided naming it. The room's purpose shifted from house arrest of an accused to exposing an alliance. The witness repeated the name louder, Renard. The inquisitor's features hardened. Where did he get the tools? The inquisitor demanded. The witness pointed with a trembling finger toward the craftsman. The craftsman's response was not an admission but a calculation. I took the order from a hand with a wax seal, he said. The wax bore a mark I smoothed at the forge after shaping. I know the ring now by its irregular cut. His words were specific. They traced a maker's supply chain without theatrical remorse. The inquisitor barked. "Show me the mark." The craftsman turned the claw so the candlelight angled along the iron. The narrator recorded the mark. A crescent under a cross. The witness' hand clenched and a sound escaped them, half sob, half oath. The inquisitor's stance altered from authoritative to defensive. He rapidly, "Renard worked with you. Renard paid for this." The craftsman answered slowly, "A commission passed by a scribe. I was paid coin. I do not ask names at the bench." The inquisitor took a step forward and pushed his palm against the craftsman's chest, as if testing whether metal could be read through muscle. "You keep names and you keep peace. The inquisitor, you give me names and you keep living." "Which do you prefer?" The craftsman swallowed. His mouth was dry. "I prefer tools to tell the truth," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. A physical struggle erupted when the witness tried to step forward. The inquisitor reached to clamp a wrist. "Quiet," he said. The witness pushed and grabbed at the craftsman, fingers finding the craftsman's apron. "Tell them," the witness, voice raw, "tell them it is Renard. Tell them the mark is Renard's." The craftsman recoiled and shoved the witness free. The accused, convulsing on the bench, made a plaintive sound that cut through the scuffle. The inquisitor drew a dagger and held it until the room obeyed silence again. The conflict peaked, the chapter's designed climax. The inquisitor ordered the craftsman to finish the application. The craftsman hesitated long enough for the witness to name another detail. The scribe who delivered the plan had a limp. That detail landed like a hammer blow. The narrator recorded it concretely, limp in the gait of a scribe seen at market the week before. A limp that tied a scribe to a particular guild. The inquisitor's face went blank. Bring the scribe. Bring Renard's seal. If this is a false lead, you will pay for it." The craftsman, pressed between personal reluctance and immediate danger, made a choice. He set the claw and pulled. The bench did its work again. Flesh tore, the accused arched, and the witness closed their eyes against the sound. 3 lines of rapid dialogue followed, a short barrage that revealed relationships and pressure. "Why did you give them my name?" The inquisitor demanded. "I did not give your name." The witness replied, "I said the mark is Renard has." "Renard sent the scribe," the inquisitor hissed. "Renard will deny this, and you will be the one to hang for it." The witness answered, "Then show the scribe or admit the canon paid for this." The room held its breath in a way the narrator would later render in his notes as silence, for 3 full heartbeats. The narrator wrote down the maker's mark and the list of witnesses present, and then noted the craftsman's next motion. He slid the small brass ring from his tool belt and offered it as proof. The ring matched the pattern the witness had described. It bore a notch made when the craftsman hammered the shank. The inquisitor snatched the ring and turned it under candlelight, then looked up, eyes hard. "So Renard's men commissioned this," he said. "So a canon is in this chain." The witness let out a ragged laugh that was almost soundless. "It has always been in the chain." The witness, we were afraid to say it. That admission reshaped the danger. The conflict moved from a single accused's fate to an institutional exposure. A new shift came. Resolve. The craftsman's earlier doubt had morphed twice now. Doubt to fear, fear to an iron clarity born of immediate threat. He stepped forward and said, "I can show where the scribe met the canon. I can show the ledger where the coin was listed." His voice was flat. The inquisitor listened as the accused went limp and a scribe's distant footsteps echoed against the stairwell. The narrator recorded the specifics. A ledger in the canon's chest, a scribe's limp, the ring's notch, and the sealless crescent. These were the concrete details that would guide the next motion of the story. The inquisitor ordered 2 men to fetch the scribe and to guard the accused. "Do not let them speak to one another," he said. The craftsman nodded, a single brief movement. The witness remained by the rail with hands folded so tightly the skin shone. They repeated the name, more for themselves than anyone else. Renard, the accused, lay still, breathing shallow. The narrator made a clinical note. The accused would be carried to a side cell for further observation. The craftsman would leave a written account of marks and payments in the scribe's ledger. The witness would be kept under watch but allowed to testify to the scribe's gate. Within the course of the room's actions, a surprising detail emerged. The craftsman produced a small scrap of parchment with an illegible brown stain and a single stamped crescent in the corner. He pressed it into the inquisitor's hand. "I thought it was a pattern sheet," he said. "I did not want to know the who, but I kept it because the line was wrong." Someone traced the seal twice. The inquisitor read the paper, then looked at the witness, then at the craftsman. "This changes things," he said. "It means a hand tried to copy the seal. It means someone is hiding a forger." The twist reframed the accusation. Perhaps Renard's seal had been forged by someone trying to pin the canon, or perhaps someone tried to frame Renard. The narrator documented that the room's dynamic had shifted from extraction to investigation in the space of an hour. The craftsman had moved from passive functionary to active informant, and the witness had progressed from mute terror to a source of named evidence. The inquisitor balanced his authority against new suspicion. The accused, though injured, had become collateral evidence rather than the sole subject of punishment. The narrator wrote the sequence: application, name, mark, ring, parchment, and aimed to trace responsibility out of the cellar's dark. The final paragraphs pegged the immediate outcomes to concrete acts. The inquisitor ordered the accused carried to a holding cell beyond the chapel, and 2 attendants lifted the stretcher with quick, practiced movements. The craftsman was ordered to accompany the men carrying the accused, and to remain ready to identify the tool at a later hearing. The witness was moved to a bench near the entrance and guarded by a single sullen deputy. The narrator recorded each assignment in neat shorthand, and then added a line. The maker's mark had been logged and would be used to pursue a scribe with a limp and a possible forged seal. The chapter closed on an exact, situational beat. As the attendants crossed the threshold, the inquisitor tapped the metal ring against the bench and said, "Remember this mark when you sleep." The craftsman watched the ring turn in the light and nodded once. The witness looked down at their hands and said nothing. The narrator made a final, clinical note. The night's operation had both inflicted immediate harm and opened a route to accountability. The last action was the inquisitor sending one man to fetch the canon's ledger and another to fetch the scribe. The narrator noted the 2 orders as the chapter's concluding event and recorded them with a date and an expectation that this trail would be followed in the next entry. Emotion root, doubt. The craftsman's doubt shaped everything he did in the cellar. His pauses, the way he checked the clamp twice, and his later choice to hand over a stained scrap of parchment. Emotion shifts. Doubt to fear when the first pull drew blood, and fear to resolve when the ring and parchment suggested a broader conspiracy. The chapter resolved its immediate conflict. The accused was moved, the maker's mark was logged, and the inquisitor set men to fetch corroboration. The narrator closed the file on the night's record with a single procedural line and the clear, physical next step: send for the scribe and the ledger, leaving the next chapter to trace those names further. Final reckoning, the broken claw. Guards shoved the bound figure toward the altar and slammed the cat's paw down with a sound like metal on bone. Shame sits heavy in the craftsman's throat as he is pulled before the bench. His hands smell of coal from the forge, and his palm still bears a burn from the night he tempered the hinge. The central problem is immediate and visible. Ledger marks, a punched cipher, and fresh claw wounds on the survivor's sleeve identify the tool and demand a name. The narrator notes the ledger while the witness bends a bruised wrist so the court can see the red crescents. Shame drives the craftsman to hold his chin and avoid every eye. Shame constrains his voice when the inquisitor asks, "Whose mark is that?" This shame becomes doubt, and doubt steers the choices he makes in the next hour. The chapel smells of tallow and wet stone. The narrator, a man in a plain scholar's coat, stands near the ledger table and taps the margin where earlier entries were recorded. He carries a brass watch closed in his coat and a pocket pen. He counts the stamps aloud so the record cannot be denied. He is deliberate and unemotional in tone, but his gestures fix the ledger's significance. The craftsman, stocky, suit-lined, wearing a heavy leather apron and a ring of small clamps at his belt, keeps his hands near his tools as if to claim them and then pull back. The witness, a slight figure in a tattered linen shift, rubs at a cloth-wrapped talisman and refuses to meet the craftsman's eyes. Craftsman. The inquisitor calls from the bench, "Tell us where this was made." The inquisitor's voice is clean, used to command. The clerk lifts a candle and leans over the cat's paw. "There is a punch here," the clerk says, breath shallow, 2 marks. "One we know, one we do not." The narrator opens the ledger and finds the known stamp at line 52, next to the Inquisition's procurement note. The room tightens around the fact that the tool connects a forge to a court. The first external event after the arrival is the ledger's discovery. The clerk pronounces the workshop cipher aloud, and the attendants pry open a trunk of tools, letting the room map metal to hand. The craftsman watches the trunk as if watching his own chest being opened. He had put the cat's paw in that trunk months earlier, sealed it with a leather strap and a waxed note. The narrator traces that wax seal in the ledger. He reads the date and the recipient's initials, attendant. "Bring the trunk forward," the inquisitor orders. Guards shift their spears. Silence becomes a pressure that forces motion. The craftsman speaks once, voice gravelly. "I filed the hinge myself," he says. "I stamped the serial with the mark, you know. I did not bind the note to the court." He looks at the witness. "I did not make the whole thing for them." His words are short. His jaw tightens. Doubt moves into fear. He tests whether denial can keep him free. The witness replies in a thin voice, "You know how it bites. You know how it holds skin." Her hands clutch the bench rail and her breath trembles. The inquisitor leans forward. "Name the man who ordered it," he says. The craftsman hesitates. He remembers the forge's heat, the night in Chapter 1 when the iron tasted coal and oil, and he slid the cat's paw into place. And the way the accused in Chapter 2 screamed as the craftsman unfolded the cloth. Those concrete moments are present in his throat now. He says, "I made it to a specification. A ledger name is a ledger name. I cannot tell you the face that asked for more." The narrator writes the exchange in his book. The brass glasses catching candlelight, and his measured pauses make the room catalogue the silence. The second external event occurs when the clerk finds the second punch, a hidden cipher half, covered in rust. The clerk's finger traces the tiny dot pattern and then looks up, face white. "This is not your mark alone." The clerk says it is shared. The second cipher ties to a clerical batch. The inquisitor's hand falls flat on the ledger. The room blanches. The witness lifts her sleeve again, shows new shallow crescents. The inquisitor says, "If clerical hands provided design or distribution, culpability spreads." The craftsman lowers his eyes. Shame begins to shift into anger, but he keeps that anger muffled behind a practical posture. The witness voice cracks. "They brought diagrams on parchment," she says. "A priest showed us where to lock the hinge. He pointed where it should tear." Her words bring a new angle. That the torture's parameters were drafted by someone within a clerical office. A hush follows, then a murmur. The narrator turns a page, ledger entry 50, 2 lists shipments to 3 courts. He says, "1 to Dijon, 1 to the Abbey at St. Loup, and this one." The attendant produces a folded diagram, creased and stained. He places it before the bench. Confrontation begins. The inquisitor asks, "Who signed the requisition?" The craftsman answers, "It carried a clerical stamp I do not read." His hands tremble slightly. He taps a clamp at his belt, a small nervous gesture. The inquisitor's face does not soften. "Then we shall read it for you." He points to the clerk, "Clerk, read the seal aloud." The clerk clears his throat, then says the name printed in cramped script. The name is a deacon known in town for keeping records and writing procurement notes. The room reacts to the syllable as if to a blow, a third event. An attendant produces a second leather strap and with a metal key slides it off the trunk to reveal an additional compartment. Inside is a small ledger within the ledger, bound in plain cloth. The narrator opens it and reads names, dates, and quantities. He reads a line that shows the craftsman's serial mark repeated and then a recipient noted only as S, followed by a margin note. For instruction private, the inquisitor's brows knit. "Who is S?" he asks. The craftsman's throat tightens. He says, "I do not know the name behind the initials. I signed for payment. I do not keep their faces." His voice goes thin. This is where doubt again shifts into denial. The witness speaks more clearly now, forced by being examined. "The priest taught them to watch where skin folds," she says. "He place it so it strips more at the inner joint." She claps a hand over her mouth. He laughed when it held. Her hands tremble as she shows the laugh lines in her memory, not as metaphor but as an action recalled. The narrator writes each phrase without comment. The inquisitor points to the craftsman. "Why would a priest instruct on a tool?" he asks. The craftsman answers with a short exchange. "He paid in coin, he gave designs. He stood and watched the proofing. Name him." The inquisitor says, "You must tell us." "I will not betray a client by name if the cost is my head for a single coin." The craftsman replies. The words are blunt. A hush follows. Then the inquisitor says, "If you will not name, you will demonstrate." The demand is a pivot. The craftsman examines the prepared clamp set before the bench. His hands know the motions. This leads to the fifth beat. Bargain and demonstration. The craftsman moves to the bench and lays a spare claw into the vise. He works methodically. He shows the hinge, points to the seam where a blade bites. He tightens a screw and claps the clamp closed so the assembled motion is visible. His movements are precise, each gesture a practical statement. This is how it works. The witness presses her palms together and a single sound escapes that might be a moan. The inquisitor instructs the guards to keep their distance. "Do it as you have done," the inquisitor says. The craftsman's hands tremble once, then steady. He demonstrates the bite and the hold. The room watches the mechanical truth. During the demonstration, a mini cliffhanger arrives. As the craftsman tightens the hinge to show how much skin can be held, the hinge catches in a way he did not expect, and the spare claw locks with a metallic ring. The craftsman frowns and looks up at the bench. The clerk whispers, "That ring is old. This batch is reinforced." The inquisitor narrows his eyes. The narrator leans forward. All attention snaps to whether the instrument will be used again. The noise of the chapel changes into a point of focus. The craftsman's fingers find a hammer. At the climax, the craftsman does the unexpected. He raises the hammer and hits the cat's paw so hard that iron fractures. He slams the head down on the stone, and the tool breaks into jagged fragments with a sound that makes the witness flinch. Guards move as one, but the initial blow has already shattered the instrument. The craftsman's face is a mask of sweat and soot. He does not shout, he does not plead. He plants his feet and strikes again until the hinge splits and the lock rings free. He looks at the shards in his hand, the edges bright where rust peels, and he throws them onto the stone altar. "No more," he says in a voice that is not theatrical but final. A rapid exchange follows the smash. "Guards," the inquisitor says, "seize him." "Arrest him," an attendant calls. The craftsman does not resist much. His shoulders are pulled by the surprise of his own action. He does, however, shove the hammer into an attendant's hand when the man reaches for him, as if handing the proof to the court that he broke the instrument. The witness steps forward despite the guards. "He broke it," she says. "He broke it in front of you." The inquisitor raises a hand to silence her, and then points to the shards, his face calculating. "Take them away. Gather every piece. Seal the ledger. The clerk moves with a look that is too fast for the room. The seventh beat is scuffle and cover up. The attendants rush to collect the fragments. An attendant pockets one jagged edge. The clerk stands and slides a stack of papers beneath his coat. The narrator sees the movements and writes them down. His pen scratches the page as hands move. The inquisitor orders the guards to lock the craftsman in the sacristy cell. He says nothing about names. He says nothing about the priest. The room's momentum shifts from fact-finding to containment. The craftsman is led away. Guards push his shoulders. He offers no theatrics, only a single motion. He presses a folded coin into the hand of the nearest attendant in exchange for one thing time. The attendant pockets it and glances at the inquisitor, who nods once. That small exchange changes the immediate outcome. The craftsman goes into the cell not with a sentence announced, but with the weight of the court's unspoken choices. Outside the cell, the anonymous witness is marched to the chapel threshold under guard. She moves slowly, her hands clinging to the talisman at her throat. Before she goes, she slips a small object into the narrator's palm, a thin metal token, bent, with a mark that matches one in the ledger. Her fingers press hard enough to leave dirt under the narrator's nails. She whispers, "Keep this. Hide it where ink will find it." The narrator tucks it into his pocket, next to his brass watch, and turns the page in the ledger. This act is a quiet counter to the court's attempt to erase evidence. The containment and testimony beat trends down in tension. The inquisitor makes an announcement. "We will account for distribution. We will review records privately." The clerk gathers the ledgers, and some attendants steady the trunk. The witness is taken away. The craftsman is locked inside the sacristy cell, where there is a narrow wooden bench and a single iron ring bolted to stone. He sits and rubs his bruised knuckles. He looks at his hands and remembers the night in Chapter 3, when he tightened the last clamp and felt his fingers throb. Those memories press as a cause for his refusal and his smash. The narrator, left at the ledger table, writes slowly, pausing between names. He hides the bent token inside the ledger's binding before he carries the book to a shelf within the chapel's small archive. He reads aloud a single line so the record exists in his voice. He notes the repair orders, the supplier stamps, and the margins that indicate private deliveries. He sets the ledger beneath a loose flagstone afterwards, the token sliding beneath it. This concrete action ensures the truth survives beyond the immediate cover-up. Night falls and the final beat arrives, the symbolic epilogue. The shattered fragments of the cat's paw are left on the altar under a thin film of dust. A candle guttered and went out. The narrator relit it and recorded the time and the steps taken that day. The inquisitor spoke to his attendants behind a closed sacristy door while the clerk accounted papers. The craftsman, alone in the cell, hears the metal scrape of keys and the guard's boots fade. He lies back on the wooden bench, his palms open, and presses his forehead to the cold stone like a man who has given away a portion of himself. The narrator returns to the bench before midnight and writes the final entry for the day. He reads the words aloud to no one, dates, stamps, initials, the bent token's description, so his voice becomes the witness he cannot otherwise offer. He tucks the ledger back under the flagstone and uses his brass watch to close the time on the page. The witness mark on her sleeve will be visible in other courts. The token will lead to a clerk who keeps his own list. And the craftsman's refusal will be a fact both of conscience and of consequence. The chapter closes with a single, concrete beat. A guard unlocks the cell at dawn and slides a scrap of cloth through the bars with a message sewn into it. The message reads a name and a place where a copy of the ledger will be safe. The narrator takes the scrap and pins it in his book. The record will endure because bodies and paper now bear the same scars. Emotion shifts anchor decisions throughout, shame into doubt, doubt into defiance, defiance into containment, and containment into a quiet preservation. The craftsman's arc completes. A maker who once fitted the hinge now breaks the hinge, trading complicity for a physical refusal. The witness arc completes. She moves from terrified silence to the deliberate act of pressing evidence into another's hand. The narrator's arc completes. A detached recorder who chooses to conceal a token in a ledger rather than leave everything to official pages. The court attempts erasure, but actions, heavy hammer blows, a hidden token, a ledger beneath a flagstone, produce outcomes that are impossible to fully remove. The chapter resolves the immediate conflict. The cat's paw is destroyed, the craftsman is detained, and the ledger and token ensure that the chain from forge to court remains documented. A twist appears when the clerk, hurried in covering scraps, is observed by the narrator sliding a second page into his coat. The narrator writes the clerk's name in the margin and plans where the ledger copy will be hidden. The twist changes how the narrator chooses to protect evidence and alters subsequent decisions about who to trust. By dawn, the chapel is quiet. The witness has been taken away but not broken. She had forced herself to hand over the token and the testimony even while guards steered her. The craftsman sits with blood congealing beneath a shallow cut on his knuckle, thinking in blunt inventory. He smashed the tool, he will be punished, but some records survive. The narrator closes his ledger and leaves the chapel with the brass watch in his hand and the weight of his choices weighing against the cold metal. He does not speak to the audience. He acts instead. A final sound, a ledger page turning, marks the end of the chapter. The last image is the shattered claw buried beneath dust on the altar and the narrator sliding a corner of cloth under a flagstone. He drops the bent token into the ledger seam and writes the clerk's name in tight script. Then a guard knocks on the sacristy door, a concrete interruption, and waits. The narrator answers by handing the guard a sealed page to deliver to the magistrate, a small, precise motion that ensures the record has left his hands and entered the chain intended to protect it. That knock and the handing over of the page is the chapter's final situational beat. The court will seek to smooth consequences. The inquisitor will claim procedural review. The clerk will say he misplaced a page. The attendant who pocketed a fragment will claim he only moved fragments to preserve them. The witness will disappear from the public eye for a while. The craftsman will be held, questioned, and perhaps punished, but his act of smashing the tool, his refusal to be a continual maker of pain, will stand as a completed choice. The narrator's ledger, the token, and the named scrap form a chain that cannot be entirely severed by a few men in a chapel. The final scene ends not on a sentiment but on a specific, concrete action. The guard lifts the ledger, bearing cloth, and carries it away under escort. The narrator watching until the corridor swallows them both and the chapel door closes with a measured, iron sound.